Hello everyone. Today I wanted to give my final thoughts on Cyrene. Right, this is probably the last video where I give like my full opinion on this character, what it is they're able to provide, and whether or not I think that she's worth pulling for, right? So let's start off with a few things straight off the bat. There is a lot of doom posting for Cyrene, and many of it is justified, but there are some people pretending that she like barely is or isn't an upgrade for most of the years, and this isn't really the case. For most of the years, I do believe she is just an upgrade. Of course, some more than others. Phanon is an exception where he gets, well, nerfed, right, by running Cyrene instead of his normal team. But in most case scenarios, she is like best in slot for most of the air DPSs, right? Phanon is the exception, not the rule. So she is semi worth it if you are looking to, boost your Chrysos Heirs teams into being able to perform a little better going into version 4, because it's obvious we're no longer going to have the version 3 enemy mechanics that we've had until now. They aren't going to shill the version 3 characters. It's all going to be about the version 4 characters, whatever new meta awaits us with the new elation path, yada yada yada, right? There are some DPSs where the jump getting Cyrene is pretty noticeable. For example, mono remembrance with Cassie. This actually does get a jump from Cyrene if you consider, right, like 4 to 5 cycles time instead of just 1 or 2 cycles, because that's just how fast mono remembrance clears shit these days. If you ignore that, then over time, Cyrene does actually surpass Tribby by a bit. It's only in the lower cycle clears where Tribby looks much better, because she obviously has no fucking downtime, unlike Cyrene, right? So there is that to consider. She is very strong for mono remembrance, but I should specify here with evernight, right? If you do not have evernight, then Cyrene's value, even though she may still be best in slot, it plummets a lot, right? Like, it plummets a lot. It's probably putting her on the same level as Tribby, if not weaker, if you don't have evernight for your Cassie team, right? And that simply is what it is. The reason for this being is not only Cyrene's buff towards Eevee, which increases the total crit damage buff evernight gives, but you also activate the max mono remembrance thing. Evernight is also able to buff Cyrene's damage, which none of the other remembrance characters can do. So you kind of get where I'm going with this, right? The synergy between evernight and Cyrene is like fucking picture perfect, basically. And even though Cass can take advantage of this if you have the full team, if you don't have evernight, this falls apart quite a bit, right? So keep that in mind. Evernight is much more a piece to the puzzle as compared to like Cyrene, Cassie, any of that stuff, right? But I will say the mono remembrance team is already strong enough in my opinion, and if you already own Tribby, going for E1 Tribby will probably make Tribby competitive with Cyrene in mono remembrance, where she has one of the biggest jumps for any of the Chrysos heirs. This one specific team, even then Tribby can be competitive with her E1. So keep that in mind. If you're not someone who's really looking to free up your Tribby for another team, and you have no issues keeping Tribby on like your current, Cassie Evernight team, then you can 100% just use Tribby completely fine. Go for E1, and you have a more universal support that isn't tied to the heirs, tying with Cyrene in her best team in the game, right? After this, you have Anoxa. Now, Cyrene is still best in slot for Anoxa. Yes, she got massively nerfed. That is no understatement for Anoxa, but at the end of the day, being able to give action advance at 12 stacks. Even if at the beginning it's slow, it does become faster the further you go down the line. And also the anoxa damage buff is just really fucking disgusting, right? To be honest, the only reason that she is better than Sunday, it isn't the action advance, it is just the massive ass damage buff of 60% attack, 40% skill damage bonus, and an additional 3 bounces towards anoxa's skill. It's just so fucking broken, right? So she is still best in slot. She is better than Sunday. I'd say she's probably maybe a, I don't know, just feeling it off the top of my head, a 30%, 40% increase in anoxa's overall performance if you consider looking into, you know, over 5 cycles, like I said earlier, instead of just looking at low cycle clears, right? So semi worth it for anoxa for sure. However, same thing with the remembrance team. If you have Tribby, it's probably just better to go for E1 Tribby, and bam, she's equal to Cyrene without needing Chrysos heirs to really give her value, right? After this, we have heelands. I do believe Cyrene is actually best in slot now over Black Swan because of the heelands buff being buffed a little bit more. So heelands, Kafka, Cyrene is probably the strongest dot team currently. Now, is it worth it if you already have Black Swan? Probably not, right? I believe I talked about this before. You have E1 heelands, you have E1 Swan, you have E1 Kafka. You can also get like signatures for Black Swan, heelands that increase the team's performance more. Truthfully, I don't think there's any reason to replace your Black Swan. At least this way she still has use. And instead of going into Sirene, I mean, I'd rather just put that cost into an Eidolon for someone else on the team, right? Mayday's Godslayer, man, it does a lot more damage. I think it does like 30-40% more overall damage from the Sirene buffed one as compared to others. It's a very significant buff, like very significant. And I think for E1 Mayday owners, Cyrene may 100% be something to look into, as the Godslayer spam with an E1 Mayday massively helps his performance in stuff like Pure Fiction and just in general. The E1 makes the Godslayer do way more damage, and now it becomes 100% his main DPS capability with Cyrene. So I do think it is worth looking into Cyrene for Mayday 100%, but once again, if you already own Tribby and you don't care about losing out on a bit of value, you could just go into E1 Tribby, and this alone really helps. But I digress, right? I know a lot of people don't like going into Eidolons for whatever fucking reason, so it is what it is at the end of the day. It's up to you whether or not you want to go for E1 Tribby or you want to go for Cyrene. Here's the quick TLDR for this entire video. Cyrene will be better than Tribby in the short term, right? Because right now, the meta is focused on all of the Chrysos heirs, their DPSs, and this entire version was basically Amphorius. So it makes sense that when Cyrene drops, she will feel better than Tribby for a lot of the Chrysos heir DPSs. But the second the meta shifts, the moment we go into version 4, I'd say halfway through version 4, many people are going to start regretting having gotten Cyrene, and Tribby will still have way better value as compared to Cyrene in the midst of Edostar. I think the best way I can kind of, you know, put this into a picture you guys can understand, currently on Pridewin, despite the fact that Fugue was once above Ruan Mei because of how strong she was with Break, Fugue is currently tier 1.5 on the Pridewin tier list, while Ruan Mei is in tier 0.5. This is the best way I can imagine Cyrene's value going. Short term, very fucking strong, gonna feel like almost a must pull for a lot of these Chrysos heirs, but the second the meta shifts, Tribby will still have absolutely fucking incredible value, especially when considering her E1, while Cyrene is just gonna be a afterthought, right? She is part of the old DPSs, and they probably won't get buffed for a long time coming, so it's like, who really cares? That's kind of how I see Cyrene's situation currently. If you only care about getting as best of performance in the short term currently, go for Cyrene. It's likely that she'll buff almost all your Crisis Air DPSs, with the exception of Phanon. But if you care more about long-term pull value, a support you're going to be able to use for years to come despite power creep and meta shifting, Tribby is 100% the better investment, and E1 Tribby is a game-changing investment, I'd say. Right. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. Peace out.